Please welcome George Kurtz and Michael Santonis.
All right, well, welcome. Good afternoon, RSA. What a packed house. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm more excited than ever, given COVID and how many years we had to be on Zoom. This is great to have a packed house here.
Always good to be in front of a good audience. Thank you.
And before we get started, there's a couple things I want to do. We'll level set and those sort of things. But the Hacking Exposed, these sort of presentations I've been doing since probably 2000. Wrote the book in 1999. So it's always fun for me to go through all the latest and greatest. But before I get going, I always like to capture the memories of each RSA. So I want to do a selfie with the audience, if you'll indulge me. So I'm going to turn around, which is never the right thing to do to an audience. But I need everybody with a big smile. I'm like a dad here. I always have the phone the wrong direction. Terrible.
He wrote the book. I only read it, so I have to stand over here.
Yeah, I don't need you. Okay, all right. 1, 2, 3, RSA. There we go.
All right.
Okay, so that'll be on social media. You'll all make that. So with that, we've got an action-packed case study today. Let me move to the next area here. And what we wanted to do was to really focus on e-crime, which is the talk of the town. We've seen the devastating impact of e-crime, all of the dollars associated with it. And really what we wanted to do was to take what we see in the real world and combine this into a case study and go through exactly what we see on a day-to-day basis and just how sophisticated these adversaries are.
So we're going to use an example that's weeks old. And we're going to replay exactly what we saw in the wild. So what you see is what's being played against organizations like the ones here in the room every week at the moment.
So what we're going to do is we'll take you through the setup, typical Hacking Exposed fashion. If you've seen it, we'll take you through the setup, we'll do a demo, and then we'll recap with some countermeasures and get things wrapped up. So with that, we can jump into it. So as I mentioned earlier, this is an e-crime actor, and I think we were one of the first to come out with funny names for adversaries. It happens to be the hot topic of the day that people are doing that. We've been at it for the better part of 10 years, but we call them spiders. And there's a whole bunch of groups that are out there, but there's a few that target business processing, outsourcing, and telcos, and really they have global reach. So the main motivation here, obviously, is money. But what we've seen, people have gotten better at ransomware detection, prevention, and also backing up data. So what we've seen now is like, let's just skip encrypting all your data and let's exfil the data and extort you.
Yeah, what's really interesting is one particular group that we're going to profile a little bit. Very small group, but incredibly active. Active every single day. For a small team of attackers, they seem to be doing a lot, very, very frequently. So once they're inside the network, they're hammering users, they're connecting to machines, and we'll show you a little bit of that as we go through the demo.
All right, so let's take a look at the kill chain here. This is a MITRE kill chain, and what I wanted to do was to really highlight some of their areas that they focus on: initial access, exploitation of applications. A lot of it is around phishing or vishing to get the initial foothold. Then we'll talk through the persistence. And what we found over the years, and a lot of this comes back to Hacking Exposed, you can pretty much live on the land and not use malware and just use existing tools, administrative tools, RMM-type tools to maintain persistence. Credential access, been at this a long time. I think that I did the first ever public demo of Pass the Hash at a keynote at Black Hat in 1999. Still works pretty good today in 2023. You know, why get fancy? And then command and control, obviously you want to maintain that persistence and control those end computers. So this gives you a bit of an idea of what they're focused on. Proxies, they really like to leverage existing tools that are out there. There's no reason to get fancy if you can blend in. All right, so let's go through the case study. Again, this is typically what we see. Registered domains happen very quickly. And then when we think, and it's very similar to the MFA provider for phishing lure. So we see domains get registered. We see the average time spent with a user. Typically, this is a help desk Vish type call. We've seen up to an hour spent with a user, kind of walking them through what they need and sounding very legit. They do a lot of reconnaissance on the company. They know the people, they know the systems, and they're very, very persistent. And most times they speak pretty good English.
Very good. Profile the organizations for weeks, months, so when they call, they do a really good job of convincing users to go to a website. The website's using legitimate certificate, the browser doesn't know any different, there's nothing wrong with the certificate, they're going to a legitimate web page, they're just preying on a user that's going to click and do some silly things in the process.
The biggest thing here is we've seen and we've heard a lot about MFA for many years. Hopefully everyone has it. It's not a panacea, it can be abused, and we saw that in some pretty big hacks over the last couple of years. We want to actually show you how that works. So we are big fans of MFA, you should have it, but there are definitely ways that MFA can be abused, and we'll show you how that works. And then once there's a level of access, then it's all about just hacking exposed 101. How do you move laterally? How do you maintain persistence? How do you add some accounts? How do you blend in? And they'll even modify VPN settings. So it's a very sophisticated attack. We see these sort of attacks across the board from different adversary groups. We just wanted to give you a sample of how it works with some representative folks that we've been tracking. So let's talk a little bit about the hack. As usual, we have a fancy, God, we have much better graphics. I used to do this in like Visio or something like years ago. I was terrible at it, but it looks better now. And so we've got just the overview here. Mike, tell us how all this is going to work.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to go through, as I said, a real-world example that's current, as in the last few weeks. It's an example of an adversary that's very, very smart, well versed in hiding their tracks. Everything that they do does not use any malware at all, because they're trying to enforce, or they're trying to ensure that they don't leave behind anything. And they're actually even set up to pull out a thumb drive, to pull out a USB key. If authorities are knocking on the door and they need to get out of there, they can literally pull out a USB key and run, and nothing is left behind. So very, very smart, hiding their tracks, very, very focused on making sure that there's little forensic evidence left behind. If you actually look at what they do, they're using great tools that you can easily get hold of. Tails is a favorite one right now, so it's an operating system that protects against surveillance. Linux kernel, effectively built around Debian, as I said, runs on a USB key. When they fire up the Tails environment, they then go through another couple of steps. So they'll set up a VPN server, they'll use OpenVPN, they'll use a freely available RDP client or VPN client. They'll spend their time making sure that they've got what we call DEDICs out there, a whole range of dedicated machines. Effectively, a machine that they VPN onto to carry out the attack to further hide their tracks. What's interesting about these dedicated machines is they're trying to use machines and have operating systems run on hardware as much as they possibly can. A lot of people talking about virtual machines spread all around the world. That's not the case, because it's easy for somebody to come in and suck up that virtual machine. Remember, they're trying to hide their tracks, so they'll try to get onto bare metal and VPN onto those machines. So Tails, VPNs, they'll use DigitalOcean droplets, which is again another virtual machine. Those virtual machines will run some of those hacking tools. So you can kind of get the understanding as we go through this. They're very well prepared. They're very well resourced as they go through the environment. They very, very careful to set up a website. They'll try to mimic the URL of the company. There'll typically be a small mistake, trick the user into going onto that particular web page. There's a man-in-the-middle attack. They love using a tool right now called EvilGenix. Very scary tool, because one of the biggest things that it does, not only is a man-in-the-middle attack tool, it actually captures your session token, which allows you to replay the token inside a cookie and then get into the Microsoft Office 365 environment. We'll step you through and we'll show you the demo as we go through that. Once you're in and you've got access to 365, I would imagine the majority of the people in here are using hybrid AD environments where you use on-prem AD, you use a combination of Azure AD, set up an account, wait a certain amount of time, it's going to effectively go from one environment to the other, and then the adversary's got access to your environment. George touched on multi-factor authentication. Once they get access into 365, they'll set up MFA, they'll use the Microsoft Authenticator app or any other authenticator app, they'll have a burner phone, they'll be effectively sending the MFA request to the burner phone, and away they go. No malware at all in any of this particular attack, which means if you're spending all your time walking the floors and going after next-gen AV or signature AV, not going to help you in this particular example of the tradecraft that this particular adversary is using.
So Mike and I were talking as we put this together, and you kind of look at how it's all done. It really looks like maybe they were, or who knows, a sophisticated red team, because the way they unfold this, actually they really know what they're doing. So, okay, Mike, so now what?
Alrighty, to that point, they do know what they're doing. They know how to get around AD. They know how to get around a lot of the security tools that people use. The RDP tools that they use are legitimate RDP tools that are out there. One that they love using right now is AnyDesk. Nothing wrong with AnyDesk. If anyone here is from AnyDesk, they just like using it at the moment. Very, very useful. And once they get all the credentials that they need, once they've effectively given themselves access, it's the standard modus operandi at this point where they want to capture and exfiltrate as much information as they possibly can, get that out, leave a ransom note, cover up their tracks, which is simply unplug the USB and go to dinner.
Yep.
That's it.
Okay, so we've talked through all this. Let's get to some action.
Alrighty, let's jump into the demo. I'm going to unlock my machine. So if we can jump over, switch over to my machine, there we are there. So I'm going to step you through the process. As you can see here, it is the Tails OS, as I talked about. Startup Tails running on the thumb drive. Once it starts up, run the standard install package for OpenVPN. Use the RDP client and get all of those installed. We use Remina RDP client for this particular example here. Open the VPN connection, and once you have that VPN connection installed, you connect to the Dedic machine, put in your credentials, and now you have access to a machine, and effectively you're ready to go to start the attack.
So this Dedic machine, this isn't like sitting in Russia or some other place, right? Where is it generally?
This could be anywhere. So the Dedic machine, a dedicated machine, dedicated piece of hardware, which is, as I said, what we typically see. This could be anywhere.
But the point is, it actually is it blends in. It's not going to come from some crazy domain. It actually is just going to blend in.
And it's going to be, there's going to be as many of them as they possibly can get. The reason behind that is if one gets shut down, they want to have redundancy built in. Once they get into the environment, they run the DigitalOcean droplet, which I talked about before. The DigitalOcean droplet is effectively a VPN. And on that VPN, they have, sorry, I said a VPN, it's a virtual machine, not a VPN. So the droplet is a virtual machine, that's running an operating system, that's running attack tools, and effectively they're just SSHing into that machine, again, trying to create a little bit of obfuscation, make it a little bit harder. And now we're at this point, they've got that SSH machine. For them, it's ready to connect to the end user. So next, what they would do is they'd contact the end user. Really?
So I thought I shut this off, sorry. Hey, I'm a little busy at the moment.
Hi, it's Mark calling from Security Operations. Sorry to bother you, but we believe your account has been compromised and we need to validate your username and password. In a few seconds, we'll send a notification to your phone. Please click it and follow the on-screen prompts. The password should only be entered on the mobile device that is registered with the company. And remember, if you ever receive a phone call asking for your password, please hang up immediately and call the company support number.
So I'm good if I just click here, right?
Let's get rid of the phone. As funny as
Sorry
that
about
sounds, that's pretty much it. It's not complex. After somebody's profiled the user long enough and established rapport, they've established comfort, they'll do the phone call, they'll get somebody to go to a particular website. As I said, all the tools are running in the background. We're behind VPNs, we're behind multiple VPNs, we're ready to go. If you look at the very top here of the phone, there's a message there that's sitting out there to the user, www.corcrsec.com. It's missing a W. So a lot of people would look at that, they would click on that, and Evilgenix is running in the background, the man in the middle attack.
So Mike, I'm sure everyone in the audience, they don't have users that would ever click on that.
Wouldn't happen, wouldn't happen.
Would not happen, right? We call that a layer 8 problem between the chair and the keyboard.
So running in the background, Steve Rentock, our poor user, is going to jump on here. Effectively, they go to the website, they get prompted to put in their username and password. A couple of interesting things happen at this point in time. So they put in their username, they put in their password, they have to put in their MFA credentials, of course. The organization's running multiple factor authentication, which is fantastic. Simple demo here. Now, what's happened in the background is everything that he has put in has been captured. And that little highlighted piece in the bottom of the screen is the session token. So a lot of people will be thinking at this point, how are you going to get around the MFA piece? Evilgenix does a great thing, as I said earlier. Captures the username, captures the password, captures the session token. Now, what's really good and really scary about this is go to microsoftonline.com, get a browser extension, get a cookie browser extension that you can put into Chrome, insert the session token, freely available. Anyone here can grab hold of this, and replay the cookie. And when you refresh your browser with that extension, you are straight into 365.
And Mike, I think the program is aptly named Evil because it is evil and it's easy. It should be Easygenix because this is not really hard to do once you get going, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very easy to get hold of, very, very easy to get onto the network. And you can see here that effectively you are in 365. At this point, you would effectively, you want to establish persistence. Like the little example that we gave with the phone call to George, with somebody falling victim to the Vish, you don't want to do that every single time. So what you want to do is download an Authenticator app, which you can see here on the screen. So download that, get it onto your phone, you get the QR code, you've got your burner phone, point the burner phone at the QR code, and effectively, we've got the user's username, we've got their password, and we've got MFA set up. We don't need to be dealing with that user at this point in time, which is a scary part.
It is. I think sometimes the longest part is just social engineering the user with the Vish, but this actually happens very quickly in real life.
Yeah, absolutely. So at this point in time, we want to get onto the machine. And this is typically, again, there may be a little bit of social engineering at this point in time. We can demonstrate here. We can demonstrate that it's the MFA is actually working. You can see that on the screen. Right now, we want to make sure that we can connect to Steve's desktop. So at this point in time, there may be some conversations going on in the background. We talked about the example of one particular attack where the attackers were talking to the help desk operator for about an hour, ensuring that they had captured the username, they had captured the password, MFA was set up perfectly. You can see here the attacker in the background demonstrating that they can get into the environment without having to go to Steve, to the actual user. So they're well set up at this point. They're good to go. And the big thing that they need to do now is be able to get into that person's machine. The tool that we see them use most often is, at the moment, and this will change, it'll change all the time, is AnyDesk. Very powerful remote desktop tool. They can RDP into the environment. So they've asked Steve to download it. Remember, they've befriended Steve. They've got him to install some software. Basic thing that everybody does, just to make sure that it's a pretty straightforward demonstration. We're not doing anything with CrowdStrike technology. We're just popping up the Defender screen here so you can see this is not malware. There's nothing malicious about AnyDesk. It's a perfectly legitimate app. So Steve runs it. It's running in the background, and now the adversary has full access into that person's machine, into that organization's network. At this point in time, I effectively would say it's game over, because now we have the ability to connect to the user, we've got the MFA set up, we've got RDP set up. At this point in time, you want to start to get a little bit smarter, and they want to look for other machines to connect to. Reason for it is you want to end up creating additional persistence. We don't want to rely just on Steve. We don't want to rely just on Steve's machine. You know, Steve may be driving home from work and realizing, it didn't sound right. That person on the phone, and then they may have this epiphany, and then they go and make some changes. So you want to get in there as quickly as you possibly can. So leaving off the LAN, go to systems config management, go and have a look at the administrators group. We're on Steve's machine here. We can see that Steve is part of the service desk team. So he's going to have a certain level of access to be able to get inside the organization. So drop to a command prompt here and just run a basic command to see what groups Steve is part of. And you can see there in the bottom, I'll just highlight it there for you. Steve's part of the service desk team.
So Mike, can I jump in here?
Yeah, absolutely.
So at this point, you know, maybe in the past you would expect someone to load up Mimikatz or something like that. Do you see that? Why don't you see that?
Tell me that again.
Mimikatz.
Well, Mimikatz is, it's been around, you know, a lot of people call it the AK-47 of password stealing. Works incredibly well.
Just keeps working.
And it just keeps, people keep rebuilding it, they keep reusing it, it keeps working. But a lot of tools will pick up, at least half-decent tools will pick up Mimikatz, and you're leaving a digital footprint behind. So what we're doing here is we're just running legitimate commands. There's nothing that we've run here at this point in time that is malicious in nature. We've just run a command to see what group Steve is connected to. We're going to run a command now, like, just to see what is the naming convention. So that was probably a little bit hard to read, but running host name, and it comes up and says CL5. You know, most organizations will have a fairly good naming convention for host names. I'm going to make the demo really simple because we don't have time to do too much reconnaissance. So I'm going to run RDP, and I'm going to connect to CL6.
But Mike, if you look at these reconnaissance commands, though, most of these really date back to like the first iteration of Hacking Exposed. It was, how do you find the machine you're on? How do you find the groups? How do you find the users? Nothing has really changed.
Nothing has changed at all. No. And this step, we're obviously doing in a couple of seconds. The attacker may spend a day, a month. They could spend a lot of time trying to work out, you know, how to get around the network, what the naming conventions are. I've just hit CL6 for the demo, and I connect into that environment with Steve Rentock's credentials. If I want to establish persistence, I'm going to set up AnyDesk inside that environment again. So that way I've got Steve's machine, and I've got another host inside the organization that I can get onto, and I can go and carry out my attacks. So if we switch back to the slides for us, just as a little bit of a summary, they built rapport with Steve. They got his username and passwords. They've set up an MFA token on their own device. They've used their permissions to install another AnyDesk agent. Now they've got network access, they've got backup network access, and they've got credentials.
Didn't seem too hard.
Didn't seem too hard at all. Nothing that we did there was too stressful or too hard. And what we're finding is it's not even a requirement for the attacker to do the vish, or it's not even a requirement for the attacker to call the service desk employee and trick them into giving away their username and passwords, or even use some of the tools that are out there. We see today that adversaries are doubling down on stolen credentials, 112% increase year on year in advertisements for access broker services. So you just pay somebody to give you the username and password to a website. If you are happy to pay people, you can pay somebody for every step of the attack, and you just have to chain it all together. It's pretty much as simple as that.
I think the key thing here, though, is this looked pretty simple. We're going to go through it. There's some, easy to use tools off the shelf, but this is actually what we see. There's nothing made up here. This demo is actually what we see. So the bar is kind of low in some areas, and at the same time, it can be pretty sophisticated when you look at those tools and session stealing and, what happens with kind of SAML hijacking and those sort of things. So, real world stuff, and I always like to say the bar is only as high as, the exploits or the attacker only needs to jump over the bar, which is pretty low.
And the other reason why I like this particular demonstration, George, you started CrowdStrike in 2011. We've been tracking the percentage of attacks that include malware or non-malware techniques. It's something that if you've read a CrowdStrike threat report for many years, if you've been following us at CrowdStrike, we talk about this every particular year. The last 12 months, or for calendar 22, 71% of the attacks, the incidents that we investigated, 71% did not use malware at all. So just think through that. When we talk about, when you walk the floors and people talk about, again, AV, and people talk about preventing malware autonomously and a whole bunch of other stuff, you've got to separate the technical tradecraft that the adversaries use with the marketing. Because if your strategy does not involve threat hunting, if it does not involve the basic ability to get visibility into the attacks and the tradecraft, you will get breached and you won't know the adversaries on your network. So that's why we wanted to use this particular attack. So we're going to go into the second part of the attack, which is to go through the additional steps to add more users into the environment, and then ultimately to start exfiltrating data and to leave an extortion note with a couple of little cool tricks and things to let everybody know about. So remember, the adversary has access to only one set of credentials so far, which is Steve Rentox. We don't want to keep doing the smishing. We don't want to keep doing the Vish-style attacks. So we want to go through the process of setting up a couple of extra people.
So how do they get the data?
So let's jump to that section of the demo. If we can switch back to my laptop here, fantastic. Let's go through that next section here. So we'll jump back onto the demo. And what you're going to see here as it comes up, if my machine responds, there we go. This is an interesting step here that I want to talk you through. There's a little bit of a misconception that you need domain admin rights to be able to do things like add users. And what I'm going to show you here is a little bit of a trick, again, to add to a little bit of how scary this particular example is here. We're using the AD PowerShell module. This is trusted by Microsoft. There is nothing wrong with this. There's hundreds of commandlets that you can use to manage AD with this particular tool. And we're going to install it on Steve's machine. This, again, there's no malware here. There's nothing wrong with it. You can set it up. And what we're going to do is actually prey on that misconception of the domain admin feature. So I'll show you here the way that this tool works. We're going to install it and have it run. And then you're going to see here what I'm trying to do. A little bit hard to read, but I'll highlight a couple of these things. What we're going to try to do is use a password, which is Monday23 with a couple of exclamation marks. And we're going to try to set up a user called SpiderUser1. So when we run the tool, we get an error message, which I'll just read it out to you. I can't even read it on the screen. It says access denied. It's that joke you said, well, it wasn't a joke, that you've been doing this since the 90s. Yeah, it shows because I can't read my screen anymore. But access denied because we don't have access, we don't have domain admin rights. But we don't need domain admin rights. This is part of that misconception. So if we use this AD module, what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to run a command to basically tell me all of the OUs that are inside this environment. And I can see here, these are all the OUs that I have access to as Steve Rentock. Now I'm going to run another command in the background, and I'm going to filter some of this because I want to see where I have delegated permissions. And I'm going to stop it here. This is the part of the demo that you want to think about. With AD, there's this wonderful feature to give delegated permissions to your service desk staff. I guarantee you, at least 2/3 of the room here is using that functionality. So instead of giving a service desk employee domain admins, you give them delegated permission to be able to set up users, to be able to set up some permissions. You don't give them domain admin to everything, but that core feature of the operating system allows you to do a couple of things. You can see here, you can access groups, you can access users, you can do things like create children, you can delete children, so users as an example. You can read properties, you can write properties. That's all we need to set up users inside the environment. Steve's got access. People use delegated permissions to run their businesses all around the world because it's a very powerful and it's a very useful feature. If you're not an attacker, which you're looking to use it to exploit that functionality. So I'm going to do the same.
So Mike, I think it kind of gets back to one of my original questions. A lot of times, in the past you would see credential theft, pass to hash, those sort of things. And because they're so noisy, again, these guys just focus on using the existing tools, some of the functionality that maybe people don't even realize they have or use. And then without admin, which is the key here, without admin access, being able to add all these different users to different groups and then still move laterally.
Correct, and not that I want to teach everybody how to go back and do this inside their organization, but Microsoft documentation, wonderful thing. You can read about the AD module, you can read about delegated permissions, you can follow the bouncing ball all the way through this demo, and you could easily test this out in your environment. Don't recommend anyone does that, because we will get to the countermeasures and talk about how you deal with this. But if we have a look here, I'm going to run this same command. This time I've picked OU users for the particular environment that I've got delegated access to, and I hit enter and it ran. I got the command prompt back. So I've set up Spider user 1. I'm going to run it again to set up Spider user 2 on the top, and it's run perfectly fine. So I'm going to run again one of these little commandlets in a second. You can see there OU users, OU lab. That's the environment that I have access to. If I just say get AD user, it dumps me out and tells me I've created Spider user 1 and I've created Spider user 2. Very simple. Nothing complex about what we just did. Well, remember the demo. Remember what we did earlier. We set up persistence. We set up MFA. So I'm going to go through the same process here. I'm going to go to Microsoft Online. I'm going to log in as Spider user 1. I'm going to put in my password. I've got the Authenticator app that I want to get hold of. I may have another burner phone or use the same ones. So once I've logged in, you'll see here, start by getting the app. So get the Authenticator app, I've already got it. I've got the QR code now. So I'm going to scan the QR code. Now I've got Steve Rentock's account. I've got Spider user 1 set up. Let's try it out. Works perfectly, so I've got my second account. And again, just to save time, we haven't gone through the process of setting up MFA for Spider user 2. So we've established persistence. We're doing an amazing amount of things inside the organization. So what's interesting now is I want to give the Spider user 1 and Spider user 2 the same rights as Steve Rentock. So I add them to the group service desk so that they've got the same exact privileges as Steve. Works perfectly fine. And now I want to set myself up to exfiltrate data.
So how noisy has this been?
Unless you're scanning for legitimate Windows commands, no malware, very little footprint left behind, and I'm just using the operating system against itself. So pretty straightforward. So I'm going to dump all the groups here, and I can see domain admins there. I know I don't have access to that, but there's a couple of interesting ones that are there that I want to look at. I want to filter in on the groups that I have access to. So I'm going to dump the groups so I can see what AD groups I've got access to. Now the demo gets a little bit interesting here, because if you see down the bottom there, I've highlighted, that says CRM users. CRM, good place to go after. It's got a lot of interesting data. So I'm going to go after that particular group to see if I can access machines inside that particular group. So I'm going to add myself to the CRM users. I've got delegated permissions. Why not? I'll keep adding myself to any of those groups that I've got visibility of.
It would be rude not to.
It would be definitely rude not to, because the demo would stop. So we'll keep going. And what we're going to do here, you can see there, I've got access to CRM users. I've highlighted that one there. So I'm having a look to see what machines are on the network that are affiliated with CRM users. And I can see there that there's a SAM account name called SQL. And it's part of the CRM SQL server. That's the description. So this is a good machine to go after. So I'm going to try to RDP, because I've got credentials, to a machine called SQL. So let's start up RDP. We'll type in SQL. We'll put in Steve's passwords, and it's failed, which is not a good sign. So why has it failed? Well, there's a couple of things that are probably a little bit hard to read, so we'll highlight it there. There's another group here called SQL Server Admins. So good guess, we're going to add ourselves to SQL Server Admins. So we're going to add ourselves as a group member, Spider User 1 and Spider User 2. So we're going to connect to it again with a Spider User 1 password, username and password. And look at that.
There we go.
RDP is a wonderful thing. We've connected to the SQL server. This has got my CRM database. So I'm going to connect to SQL Server Management. I'm going to go to my main table. I can traverse the table. Here's all my customer information as an attacker that I'd want to get my hands on. So I'm just going to dump everything in that database. I'm going to dump it all onto the desktop. Legitimate SQL server commands. There's nothing here that's, again, malicious. So I've exported all the data. I'm going to leave a very complex and scary note here on the screen. We've seen some interesting ones in the last 48 hours. Very, very funny attackers. They're trying to be a little bit more humorous with some of the notes that they're leaving behind. But we're going to leave a note behind. I'm going to store that file. I'm going to copy the file onto the desktop. Now, remember all of the tools that we used before. So I'm going to put that file onto my desktop. Let's get rid of AD. Let's jump to the desktop. Let's paste the file there. Let's go back to Steve's machine. And we're going to effectively copy the file onto Steve's machine using AnyDesk. And what we're going to now do is jump over to the DEDIC, to the dedicated machine that we had connected to. We're going to copy the file to the DEDIC. We're going to move the file to the DEDIC. At this point in time, once we've pasted it, we're going to jump back over to the Tails machine. So we've come out of DigitalOcean. We're back onto Tails. We've dumped the file onto the USB. Now, I could have put it anywhere, but just for sake of the demo, we put the file onto the USB. And this is the cleanup step. Unplug the USB.
And in Tails, if you haven't used it, it's super easy to use. There's actually an option where you can create an encrypted volume. So you can store all that data in the encrypted volume. It requires a password. You pull it all out. You've got the data, a key. It's encrypted. You're good to go.
That's it. So, you know, the example here, what we typically see, a lot of these people, when they're about to be caught, they love to use the USB because they literally pull it out, as I mentioned, and run. Or they go into a library. They're sitting there somewhere in a public library, in a coffee shop, in a Starbucks. They run the attack from anywhere in the world. All they need is that first USB key, and that is it. And if it sounds like we're oversimplifying it, we really are, because that wasn't a complex demo. But the exfiltration, the impact of the exfiltration, we've seen some of the largest organisations in the world fall victim to this particular attack every week for the last quarter or two, pretty much, which is why we wanted to show it to you all.
And I know we're going to talk about the countermeasures, but I think that's where it's really important to understand what signals are coming from these endpoints and what's happening, because the use of those command line tools may be legit from an administrative perspective, but as you start to see these things get pieced together, it's taking these very weak signals and then being able to create a story of what's happening there to be able to identify it. One of the things that I always like to talk about is that most big organizations are going to have an incident. Everyone seems to have an incident. You want to make sure you can contain the incident. It doesn't turn into a breach or a data leak or something like that. So what we want to do now is maybe move into the countermeasure phase.
Yep.
which is, again, if you're familiar with the Hacking Exposed book, we always wrap up with the countermeasures for what we've seen. So, Mike, why don't you take us through some of the thoughts around this?
Yeah, this is a really interesting one. As I talked about earlier, no malware used, so you're not going to get an event popped up in your AV tools. You're not going to get a traditional event in an EDR tool. This is something that you are going to need to collect as much telemetry from as much of your organization as you possibly can. This is the reason why we talk so much about visibility, not getting into debates around prevention versus detection. You can't be good at detection, you can't be good at prevention unless you have visibility into everything going on inside your organization. Obviously, from an advice perspective, try to get as much telemetry as you possibly can from your identity stores, from your endpoint, get relevant information from the network, from firewalls. A lot of it's going to be noise, but you want to filter out the noise to keep the important information. The challenge that you're going to need to think about, especially for those of you that are in large organizations with so much telemetry, you need somewhere to put it. And this is where the conversation around AI and ML comes in, because you need to go through that telemetry as quickly as you possibly can. If it takes you hours to sift through all of that telemetry, we just did a demo in 10 minutes. So you need to be able to move very, very quickly so you can make decisions as quickly as possible. So accounts that are being created, new applications that you've never seen before, people moving laterally, whether they're doing anything malicious or not, you need to capture all of that information and you need to be looking at it.
And the key thing here, though, is all of these weak signals will show up. We look at a combination of weak signals to actually give you an idea of what's happening there. So I think as you go back and you kind of look at your own security, there are things that are going to happen on a daily basis, like account creation, resets, et cetera. It's how you string them all together, or have the ability to string them together, connect the dots, which is really going to tell you if you have a problem. Again, there's no malware, right? Just tools that we're running, but how do you piece it all together and actually stop it is really important.
Yeah, one thing to quickly just touch on, we're going to run out of time in a sec, but one of the quick things to touch on, one of the reasons why we keep saying there's no malware, a lot of EDR tools actually pivot off malware, which is an interesting discussion point in itself. If there's no malware, a lot of EDR tools will have no event for you to go and look at, which means they become very difficult to use operationally.
So they key on the detection first.
They key on the detection first, and if there's nothing to detect, what do they have?
Right.
Which is why we keep talking about this, because you need to be able to easily go through your telemetry to find this information inside your organization. This is a big one. Maintaining good identity store hygiene. Making sure that you know what accounts are being created, making sure whether people are doing some of the things that I just showed you, leveraging delegated permissions, adding people to particular groups. One of the things that you want to think about is how many of you are protecting the services that you use to set up MFA. Hopefully after the demo, it's something that you all go and have a look at. So the thing that you want to also think about is hybrid environments where you use on-premise AD and Azure AD. Because what ends up happening is that account that gets created in one will get synchronized with the other. We see adversaries coming into the cloud where maybe you don't have the right level or the right types of security tools, and then suddenly they move on inside your organization.
That's a feature.
It's a feature, apparently. Or they go the other way. They go from on-prem into the cloud, and they get access to your cloud stores and your cloud information. Go through one more there. I think there's two more. So the other big thing is know what's running on your endpoints. I can't stress this enough. Have a list of all of the applications that are being installed inside your organization. If AnyDesk is not a legitimate tool, know that it's running inside your organization. If you read our threat reports, or if you read other threat reports, typically you'll see vendors talking about the tradecraft, the tools that adversaries are using. Go and grab our current threat report. We've got a list of tools that adversaries are using. Go and hunt for those tools inside your environment. Really simple thing to do. Even if they're legitimate tools, it doesn't mean that they should be inside your organization if they're not used by your trusted users. Alrighty, and then let's talk about some prevention. Obviously in our demo we showed in a couple of seconds the ability to move laterally. In reality it's a little bit different. We typically see on average attackers find a way in and it takes them about 84 minutes to move laterally inside an organisation, what we call the average breakout time. So be aware of that. That number is coming down. So in 2021, it was 98 minutes, an adversary finding a weak point in the network, using that to break out into the organisation to move laterally. That number has come down to 84 minutes. So far, in the first quarter of this year, it's well under 70.
And Mike, one of the things that maybe a little bit of a PSA that I want to comment on that we typically see, and again, as I say, it may sound like, wow, that's really bad, but so many organizations have it. I guarantee there's a whole bunch in here that do this, but PowerShell scripts with embedded credentials and generally admin type credentials we see all the time. It is really one of the first things that the adversaries are going to hunt for. It's hard to control unless you have some other third-party software, PowerShell script, and hard to enforce MFA around that. So as you think about MFA, there's a lot of accounts, and particularly machine and service accounts, that may not have that. And you start to find these credentials in PowerShell scripts all over an enterprise.
Yeah, George said it at the start. I don't want anyone walking away from the session thinking that we don't like MFA. We love MFA. MFA everywhere. Turn it on to everything, to George's point, service accounts, everywhere you possibly can. Protect your identity stores, especially legacy identity stores, Active Directory. Use strong phish-resistant methods. Use the current FIDO2 standards. Make sure that you create a robust environment to make it harder for the attacker.
All right, so we'll get things wrapped up here. Hopefully this gives you an idea, again, how simple it is, but the folks behind these attacks are pretty sophisticated. They're going to continue to target companies. We just gave you a view of e-crime. We break it down into nation state, e-crime, and hacktivism. You can find a lot of this information on our website, on our blogs. We have an incredible intelligence team. We see this through our consulting work, our intel team, and obviously telemetry from 176 different countries. So you can get educated, in some of those websites like ours and others. And I wanted to get wrapped up, and I wanted to thank my partner in crime, Mike, and I also wanted to thank the audience here. We know you got a lot of busy things you could be doing, and we love coming back. I'm probably going almost 30 RSAs, so they'll hit you with the reviews and those sort of things. So you'll have that on the reviews. And with that, anything else to add, Mike?
Just the last 2 points. Understand the complexities of your organization, understand the adversary tradecraft and what they do, and try to stay safe and make it hard for the adversaries to be successful.
All right. Well, we appreciate it. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next year.